What up, everybody? Welcome to a live stream. If you're new to the live stream, my name's Paul Abernathy. Thanks for joining me. We're doing a little exam prep, answer questions today. Really testing out the software in the new studio. Green screen is not up yet, so it's a virtual screen, so bear with me. But everything else is going. Everything else is set up. We are in Virginia. We are in the new studio. So hopefully we'll give you a video of that here in the next couple weeks as we finish it out, get a bunch of stuff still installed that we want to get installed. But anyway, thanks for joining me on a Sunday morning. We're looking to do a weekly show on Sunday mornings. So we're testing out that time frame, see if that's good for everybody. Get up, have a cup of coffee, it'll be early. We are on the East Coast now. So again, my friends back on the West Coast are probably still asleep. But we moved everything now to the East Coast. So now, if you have any questions or anything you want to ask, feel free to ask them in this session. I'll answer anything if you have a code question or anything you want to ask at all. Hopefully you're checking out my podcast. We did 3 podcasts yesterday, and as I promised, we will get those moved over to Fast Track's Tube as well. And so, again, I'm looking scruffy. Again, it's been a long 2 weeks, or a week and a half. So anyway, we're just testing out the stream, and I figured we'd do some exam prep this morning and answer some code questions if you had it. All right, so let's go on and get into it. All right, so these code questions are out of our code question database that is available to all of the Fast Track students. So some of these questions may look familiar to you, but these are based on the 2023, and this is out of the Journeyman package. Now, I tell all students that are in our program, whether you have a Journeyman and Master package, you want to make sure you do them both. Right? You want to make sure that you're studying the Journeyman questions as well as the Master questions, because to be honest with you, it really doesn't matter whether they're Journeyman or Master. It's all about looking up questions in your code book and getting real familiar with it, that type of thing. So, also, I will announce we do have our calculations webinar coming up in a couple weeks. I'll get that posted on our website. Make sure you join that. And we're going to redo the webinar that we had to cancel due to my move, getting everything out here to Virginia. We'll be redoing that one as well. And that was how to do existing calculations on an existing dwelling. So if you're going in, you're a contractor and you're going in and you're trying to determine what headroom we have on an existing service, things like that. So we'll be going over that in a future webinars as well. So if you're never subscribed to that, make sure you click that notification here, and we'll make sure that we get you a notification of when we're going to be going live for that. And you can always register over on our website as well. All right, so let's look at this question. Now, feel free to post your answer in the comments, and we will also look at the code reference and everything. So, but we're going to talk a little bit about dissecting questions today and what to look for when you're looking at a question. And some things, the NEC is great document for the minimum safety standards, but maneuvering it can sometimes be difficult. So anything that you can do to help you maneuver the code a little bit better, whether that's tabbing out your code book, highlighting, underlining, again, if your state allows it, that's great. But even if you're not taking an exam, time is money. So if I'm on the job and I want to make sure that I can find the answer quickly, tabbing works, highlighting works, underlining works, all those type of things really make it easier for you to be able to maneuver the NEC. But there's some things that you're just going to have to know based on code knowledge. And so that's the thing that it's harder for most people, is being able to look at something and say, well, that makes sense. I'll give you an example. Look at this question on the screen right here. When I see this, it says underwater luminaire. I know from trade experience, and you should also, that we're talking about the only application in the National Electrical Code which is going to deal with anything to do with underwater. It's going to be really, and anything to do with luminaire, it's going to be in Article 680. And since you know that it's dealing with an underwater luminaire, it narrows it down. So when we say dissect a question, and you've heard me talk about it many times, when we say dissect a question, we're just looking at this question right here and we're going, okay, well, it's underwater luminaire. So it's pools, spas, hot tubs, that type of thing. We know it's in 680, but we know we're talking about underwater luminaires, right? So you can go to the index of your NEC and you could look under luminaires, you can look under underwater luminaires, you can look under pools, all those type of things. Now, again, as you all know, we can't do that here because the NFPA doesn't give us the index to use on link. So it makes it more difficult. I sure wish they would do that. And you know what? At one point, I'm probably going to, now that everything's moved here to Virginia, at one point, I'm probably going to take a code book and cut out all of the index and just scan them in so that we can look at it as a PDF and I can share that on the screen. So probably going to end up doing that because, again, NFPA doesn't give us the ability to look at the index. And I think it's important that you understand the index and how to use it. But when you look at a question like this, you want to realize that there are keywords here. Underwater luminaires. Okay, so you know it's in 680. In 680, you could bold scan, and that's when you look at the headings and get you to luminaires. The other thing that you know here is that when it says underwater luminaires, that it's not going to be specific to things like hot tubs and spas, so you're not going to be further back into those parts. It's the general requirements, and it's going to be up front in 680. So at least it cuts down where you need to be by looking at this question. So me looking at this question, I know daggone well it's pool, spa, hot tubs. I know it's 680, but since it's underwater luminaires, I know it's going to be a general requirement. So it's going to be up near the front of 680. And what are we looking for? And it's clear, it says shall not, which is a mandatory statement, shall not have a voltage between conductors over a certain voltage level. Now, if you're taking an exam, for example, and you already know this answer, just go on and mark your answer and move on. But if you're taking an exam and it's electronically and you can mark it, make sure that if you don't know the answer and you're guessing at it, that you spend about a minute and a half or so on this question. If you still can't answer it, go on and electronically mark it and then move on to the next question. What I don't want students to do is dwell on a single question and start eating up some time, that type of thing. That's not what we want. Okay, so let's go see here if we can dissect it down and see which one of these. Okay, so voltage conductors over a certain voltage. So we're going to go to the NEC. Share this tab. And if you go to 680, and real quick, I kind of show you, when you're bold scanning, what you're doing is you're looking at the headings of the articles. And then you're looking at the bold text to see where it says something about voltage, something about underwater luminaires. That's bold scanning. Because again, provided you get yourself in the area, and if you look over here on the left, you'll see that it's kind of like looking at your code book here. Here's 680 right here. Okay, right here on the left. And you scroll, let's see here. Hard to see it here. Right here, 680 right here. And if you look at the headings, you see permanent installed pools, and then you'll see underwater luminaires. That actually is one of the headings. Okay, so that's where we're at, 680.23. Right here, underwater luminaires. And then when I tell you to bold scan, we would have gotten here by going to 680. If you didn't use the index, you would have hit bold scanning, and you would have gotten to underwater luminaires, which is part of the verbiage that's in the question itself. Now I'm hyper-focused on looking for voltages, right? And so as I'm scanning down, I'm looking for voltages. And here we see it says voltage limitations. And quickly, no luminaires shall be installed for operation of supply circuits over 150 volts between conductors. Boom, there's your answer. So you come back to your question here and 150. And of course, you can check your work right here. As we can see, NEC reference 680.23A4. Okay, so it's just that simple. But I wanted to take a little more time on this first question in order to be able to talk about the introduction and then let you see how you would bolt scan this. So again, obviously the key triggers are underwater luminaire. You have to kind of know that this is dealing with swimming pools and 680. And then you'll migrate right to there, and then you can use bold scanning, or as I said, you can go to the index and get it that way. All right, the next question we got, it says a copper conductor required to connect the common bonding grid on a swimming pool shall not be smaller than blank AWG. All right, so in this case right here, we automatically know what we're talking about here. We're obviously in what, 680 again. And in this situation, we're talking about the common bonding grid, means the conductor that's going around connecting all of the pieces that are required as part of the equipotential bonding grid. So there's a size requirement for that conductor, okay? And it can't be smaller. It could be larger, but it would be a waste of money. The code says not to be smaller. So it's that conductor that's running around interconnecting that conductor. So what size would it be? Well, since we know this is an intersystem bonding, this is a equipotential bonding grid question. Okay, so it just happens to say common bonding grid, but we know it's the equipotential bonding grid connection that's, say, going around the ring, that all the other elements like metal fencing, the pool shell, if it is a conductive pool shell, all of them tie together to these conductors. And so what sizes should they be? Well, this is an example of on an exam where you just have to know the answer first, because you know 1210 is not going to be applicable, too small. So those type of things. And of course, none of the above would think, okay, well, maybe it's required to be a 6. And this is where some people would go wrong and they'd say, oh, it's a 6. So this is where we end up going to the code, and we're going to where it says equipotential bonding grid. Okay. Now, underneath of the index, it might be under swimming pools, that type of thing. It might be under grounding. Get used to doing what we call looking for triggers. Okay, so in this case, I would look under swimming pools. That would be a trigger. I would look under bonding grid, under swimming pools, those type of things. But this is an example of one where you read it, that through our program, for example, you'll learn that, okay, this is clear. We're talking about equipotential bonding grid and the sizing of that copper conductor. Okay, so going to the NEC, I'll take you there. All right, going to the NEC, we look to the left, we see something titled equipotential bonding right here. Now that's the other thing that throws people off a lot in the NEC in code questions on exams is they'll say, well, why don't they just tell me it's an equipotential bonding grid or a bonding conductor, and I know what to do. Well, usually on exams, it's not going to be that easy, right? They're not going to just tell you it's an equipotential bonding conductor we're talking about. They're going to tell you that it could call it a bonding grid, and you have to be able to put together the pieces. The one thing to understand about the National Electrical Code and exams is that the AHJs, they have to form their own interpretations. The code isn't an easy document to understand. When you go to take an exam, it's the same principle with the people that are writing the questions for the exam. They don't always write them in a way that might be logical, and you can't get in their mind, but you need to know how they're trying to address it. And so you have to be flexible. You have to use a lot of your knowledge, and that's why you're required to have the hands-on experience before you can take an exam. So some of this stuff should come into your mind because you've actually done it. Now, I get it. Sometimes we're doing some installations and the code will give you, the exam will give you questions and you're like, well, I've never done this before. So it's, you might be a little bit more struggle. But if you go through a structured training program, whether whoever's course you're using, doesn't matter whether it's Mike's or mine or somebody else's, make sure that you spend extra amounts of time going in and out of your code book. And we do it in our program with little chevrons. Not sure how other people do it, but that's how we do it. All right, let you go in and out, in and out. All right, and so that's what you want to do with that, is go in and out of your code book. Okay. All right. So in this case right here, what we're looking for is bonding of the parts, because that's what we're talking about, right? The question, I'll take you back to the question real quick. The question is to what? Connection. Okay. So the copper conductor required to connect the common bonding grid on a swimming pool. Okay. So we're interconnecting. We're bonding all the parts. It's kind of where you have to read between the lines on it. And so that's what we're doing. Now, here it says the parts specified in 680.26b1 through b7 shall be bonded together using solid. So that answers some of the questions that people have. Can you use stranded? No, this is a solid copper conductor requirement. Solid copper conductor, insulated, covered, or bare. Okay, not smaller than 8. Okay, not smaller than 8 AWG. Okay, so that's the requirements there. Now, here's the thing where it throws people. So notice that it says that it can be insulated, covered, or bare, and you're thinking, wait a minute, if it's part of the equipotential bonding grid, right, then doesn't it have to be bare? No, that is the connecting of the pieces together. That's the interconnections, right? Interesting enough, when you get down to the perimeter surface, that is the option where you can run a single 8 around the perimeter or the contour of the pool. This option, if that's the case, that one is where it's required to be bare, okay, in that scenario, okay? If you're going to run, I'll show you, if you're going to run the single, okay, right here, see here, copper grid is constructed of 8 gauge solid bare copper. Okay, so we're not talking about the interconnections. Now that can be insulated, cover, or bare. But if you're using the perimeter surface requirement, you're using the 8 for the perimeter that goes around the contour, then that would have to be bare. Okay, a lot of people don't realize that. Okay? And it'll tell you when it needs to be bare. Okay, but up here, if you're just interconnecting all of these options below, you're just interconnecting them, then it can be insulated, cover, or bare. But if it's the ring, then it's got to be bare, that type of thing. Get the difference? So we're talking about bonding all the parts, but that really wasn't the question. The question was as simple as the size. And obviously the size is going to be 8 in all cases there. Where's our code reference? 680.26b. Okay. But that's the interesting nuances about the NEC is that I could run a solid 8 gauge around the perimeter of the pool, right? But then all of the interconnecting pieces that bond everything together could be insulated. Doesn't have to be bare. But the ring would have to be bare because that's what's doing the perimeter, and that's what's in contact with the earth. Obviously, if it's insulated, that would be pointless. So interconnecting the different requirements of B1 through B7, they could be insulated. Where it tells you the actual perimeter ring, for example, if that's the option you're using, that has to be bare, right? Makes sense? Okay. Also, conductive pool shell. The part that if you're doing a conductive pool shell and you have this copper grid under the pool shell, well, that itself would have to be bare because obviously being insulated would be pointless, right? But if you're interconnecting all of these things together, like running from that bare 8 that's running around the pool and you're running over to a metal fence, that's needs to be bonded because it's right next to the pool, well, that could be bare because that could be insulated. Because that's just a bonding connection from the ring over to the fence. It's the ring that has to be bare. Make sense? Hopefully it makes sense. All right, let's go on to another one. All right, next question. It says, a permanently wired radiant heater shall not be installed within blank feet of a swimming pool and shall be mounted at least blank vertically above the deck. Okay, so in this case, we're talking about a radiant heater. And so let's go to the NEC real quick. And well, that's obviously specialized pool equipment. And you look at the list, it's not a gas-fired water heater. That's specialized pool equipment. And let's see here. So underwater audio, no. Pool cover, no. Deck area heating. And then the first thing that we're going to do in our mind with this kind of question is it's talking about distances. And here's a permanently wired radiant heater, and you see 5 and 12. That's all you really need to know for an exam. Now, when you're studying, I would expect you to read this out a little bit so that you can kind of, rather than on an exam, you're just looking for triggers, right? And you're looking for, oh, I need to answer 5 and 12, 5 and 12. But when you're studying, I recommend that you take your time, really read it. And this is where I tell students all the time, the new feature that we added in our program, and again, if you're coming and you're not in our program, I get it. There are a lot of great programs out there that teach the NEC. So I'm not here to say mine is better than anybody else's. It's just my way of delivering it, and it's part of our system. But in ours, we added something called Fast Tracks Interact. So you're allowed to ask questions directly in the program. So for example, if there was something you didn't understand, you could left click, you could highlight it, you could copy it, and you could paste it in what's called Fast Tracks Interact, and I will answer your question. And it allows you to get responses much quicker. And that's what I want for students, is to get quick responses. I want us to try to. Now, with that said, it's been a little slow over the last week and a half because we've been moving to Virginia. But in general, that's where we're going to give you some quick responses to that. So obviously in this case, it's 5 and 12. So let's go back here. And here you see right here, we had 5 and 12 and a reference 680.27C2. Okay. So clearly here, we were still in swimming pools. So we were still in 680. The other aspect of this is specialized equipment. Okay. So we had to go down and have to understand that where it's at in the structure of the NEC. And that's where it's important for you to use things like the table of contents and things like that. Now, you could have looked under swimming pool. I don't have, in fact, my code books, believe it or not, are still packed up in the pod. So, and then link doesn't give you index, so we can't really look it up. So that's where you got to take the effort and look it up and see maybe there's something under radiant heater in the index. Maybe there is looking up under swimming pools. You scroll down, you may see something that references radiant heater, things like that. Okay, so again, that's how you dissect a question using your NEC. Okay. All right, the next one here is heating cables installed in a poured concrete floor. Let's see here. So heating cables installed in a poured concrete floor in a bathroom must have blank. Protective leads, approved fittings, be GFCI protected. Now, this is an example where you may be so inclined immediately just to go all of the above, and that may or may not be the answer. But where are we dissecting here? Okay. Well, it's specifically talking about heating cables. And we know that there is an article that deals with heating, and that is 424. And that's very specific to heating, radiant heating in a building, in the wall type heating, all those type of heating. We know that there's an article specifically for this. So you could bold scan, and what we're looking for is heating cables. Now, also, you could go and look in the index under heating cables and see if you have anything. If anybody's got the code book handy and they're in the comments, let me know if that's what you found inside the index. Feel free to comment and add anything you want. Let us know where you're from, where you're watching from. Love to see where everybody's at. And I don't think there's anybody on the West Coast maybe that's up at this time. But if they are, love to hear from you. Let's see. So anyway, so where are we going to go? So we know it's heating cables. So let's go to the NEC. All right, so we're in the NEC. And of course, if we went to the table of contents, and I don't know that they even give me that. in link. I really don't think they do. No. Sometimes it is disappointing because I think that it would be nice if link was the entire, just the code book, you know, like the old PDFs used to be, that type of thing, but they're not. All right, so if we go down here, we look at the code here and we see right here, right here, that we have 424 fixed electric space heating equipment. And this is obviously heating cables that are going to be embedded in the bathroom floor are going to be what? They're going to be fixed electric space heating. They're heating that space. Okay, so get used to that type of thing. So we're here. Now, if I was bold scanning and using that technique rather than using something in the index, because under the index, you could go under fixed electric space heating equipment, but you'd have to know that's what we're talking about. But if I was bold scanning, what we do is if you're in an exam or you're studying and you want to try bold scanning is, again, we're looking at the bolds and we're looking for something that pertains to the verbiage that's in our question. And so this is something where you have to train yourself to really remember what's in the question. There was a reference to bathrooms in there. There was a reference to, again, heating cables, all that type of stuff. So we're going to kind of go down. Instead of going to the left, we're just going to kind of bold scan down. All right. General. And also, if I remember the question, let's take it back, using the answers to help you as well. Okay. But we're talking about heating cables, concrete floors, and bathrooms. That's what we're trying to focus on. Okay. So supply conductors. Let's see here. Location. There's nothing in there that helps us. Nothing in there that helps us. Disconnecting means nothing in there helps us. See, this is bold scanning. Control devices, not what it's asking in the question. No. No. Overcurrent protection. No. We're just, okay. Markings, nameplates. No. Okay. Electric space heating cables. Okay, we're getting somewhere now. All right. But I don't see anything that's telling us anything that we need to know. Area restrictions. Okay, beyond certain areas. All right. Shower tub walls, whatever. Okay. Keep going. Heating cables and dry in walls. Okay. None of that stuff is really. Remember the question? It was in concrete, right? So I guess it was in poured concrete floor. So installation of cables. Oops, sorry about that. Installation of cables in concrete or poured masonry floors. All right. Protective leads. Okay. Approved fittings. Okay. GFCI protection. All of those are in this list of items for that. So if we look back at the question, that when they're in a poured concrete floor in a bathroom, they must have protective leads. We saw that. Approved fittings, and we saw GFCI protection. So clearly, all of those pertain. They're just in different subdivisions. Okay, so there, and there's our reference, 424.44 CE. So we'll go back here to verify that. 24, there's C. We actually could say it was C, D, and E. So it's actually, those are the three that quantified that it was all of the above. Okay? So just kind of working through it, taking your time is how you're going to be more successful. There are people, I got a call the other day. From a gentleman, and we'll look at some more questions here in a second. I got a call the other day from a gentleman who said that he spent $800 on a 2-day course, and he literally got nothing out of it. And that's a shame. That is sad that people out there are taking people's money, trying to teach them shortcuts. There's no shortcut to learning the NEC, right? It is. So it's one of those things that you just have to take the time to do it. What do we got? We got Red Dog. Good morning, Red Dog. California, West Coast, man, you're up early. You're an early riser, getting out there on a Sunday, probably sitting out and enjoying the sunrise like I did. Beautiful, glorious day to be alive. So again, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it. All right, so learning the NEC is one of those things where it just takes time. Don't get discouraged. If you have trouble with an exam or you're having trouble, don't get discouraged. You'll get it. Don't worry. It just takes time. And sometimes you have to take it twice and 3 times, and it's okay. Don't let it discourage you. Certainly don't let it get you down, that type of thing. All right, let's go on to get to another question. All right. Oh, this is one that I get from people quite a bit that struggle with this. It says, if a 3/8 inch FMC raceway has one bare 14 conductor installed, blank 14 AWG THEG conductors can be added with an outside fitting. So this is one of those ones that can get people on an exam, kind of cause them to get it wrong because they move really too quick and they don't think about the verbiage that's in this question. Okay, so first thing that you're going to notice is really a no-brainer if you're studying to learn the NEC. On this one, FMC has its own specific article. It's a no-brainer, Article 348. So we know that. You can go to the index and look up FMC, flexible metal conduit. You can go to the table of contents and look it up if you're questioning what article it is. But what I will tell you is that FMC, you got to get used to, and as you study in a program, a structured program, you start to learn which articles are bigger and which ones that you might have to bold scan or use the index harder. But when I get used to this, or students get familiar with this, they'll learn that certain articles are pretty short, and it's probably better to just simply bold scan and hit the key points and know what you're looking for. Okay, so obviously this has to do with filling in a raceway, how much I can get in that FMC raceway. And I already have one bare 14 in there. So the question's asking, how many more 14s can I actually put in there when I have FMC of that size and it has what's called an outside fitting? Means the throat doesn't go inside, it goes over the outside only. Okay, so this question tells me that I'm going to go right to the 348, and I'm going to be bold scanning, and I'm looking for something that specifically talks about conductors in these raceways, that type of thing. But I'm going to show you where people get this one wrong, and I say this because this is one of the questions that are in our competency reviews in our Fast Tracks program. And they routinely get this wrong, okay? So let's go look at the code. And we're going to go to 348, which you should have by now. You'll look and see that it is indeed right here, flexible metal conduit. And it's a relatively small article. So we'll go here, and here's where we're at. So here's the scope, 348.1. And you're bold scanning now. So what are we looking for? We're looking for FMC, raceways, some type of raceway fill, something about the number of conductors. That's what we're looking for. So we're going to bold scan. And this is a practice that need to get familiar with on an exam. Because again, if you have to look everything up in the index, you're probably going to run out of time. So there's code knowledge that you have from all the years that you put in to be able to sit for the exam. And then, of course, it's just trade knowledge and being able to understand proper ways to do things. They're not tips. They're not tricks. They're understanding how to bold scan, and you have to work the memory. And the memory is you've got to remember things from the question, triggers from the question as you're bold scanning so that they kind of just pop into your head. It takes practice to do it. So here I'm looking at that has nothing to do with it. That has nothing to do with it. That's nothing to do with it. Use is permitted, nothing to do with it. Sizing, that's just sizing of the various sizes that we can have. All right, so that's nothing to do with it. Okay, number of conductors. That's kind of what our question is all about, right? Number of conductors. All right, it says the number of conductors shall not exceed that permitted by the percentage fill specified in Table 1 of Chapter 9, or as permitted in Table 348.22 for a metric designator of 3/8. So here's a thing that people lose sight of all the time. You do normal raceway fill, you use Chapter 9, Table 1 as you normally would. But the trigger to this question is it's very specific to what? 3/8 trade size. And that's what this table is all about down here. Now let's see if I can expand this table and how it shows up. All right, it's not going to show up very well, but at least our conductor sizes do show up fine. And so ours were 14 gauge, right? So here you've got 14 gauge along the left side right here, right? And our conductors were THHN, remember? And we had that one bare. So one thing to notice that this table only deals again with 3/8, so don't get drawn away. See this little asterisk right here? This is where it gets people. You have a little asterisk right here. If you go down here, it says, look, it says, in addition, one insulated cover or bare equipment grounding conductor of the same size shall be permitted. So that's in addition to what's given here in this table. And I'll show you how this works. So here's 14, and we're looking at THHN. So we're coming over here. Now notice the fitting was a what? Outside fitting. So it's right here. So it says that you can have how many? See, outside fitting of 14. 4. Now, it says that's the number you can have, but you can also have one more, and that is the equipment ground. But that doesn't add to the number. So here's where people make a mistake. They'll go to the exam question right here. Let's go back. And they'll want to do 5 because they say, well, wait a minute, the table says 4, and then I've got that one bare, that's 5. Remember the question said what? Look at it. It says it already has one bare in it. And what did the code say? The code said, in addition to what's in this table. So the answer, since the question, it's not a trick question, it already has one in it. So that is the addition. So the real answer is 4, because that's what it says right here in the table. So we'll come back to the question. So it already has one bare in it. That is the in addition to the 4 14s that we can put in it. So you have to really take your time to read the question, because many people will click 5. And it didn't ask you for the overall. It wanted to know what number 14 THHNs could you put in there. And remember, that bare is the asterisk. It's the addition. So 4 is the right answer for this one. Right? And there's your reference table 348.22. This one people get wrong all the time because they don't stop and read the question and they think this is a total question, which means that I want to know how many overall. No, it wants to know how many THHNs can be in there. The asterisk allowed that additional bare to already be in there. Okay, so it's 5 overall conductors, but that wasn't what the question was asking. And I think that a lot of people say that, why do they trick me, or why are they trying to trick me, or whatever. This is not a trick question. This is a question that makes you hyper-focus on how it's written. That's what's important. How the question is actually written and the ability for you to be able to dissect it out. And one way to do that is you'll notice that this is one part of the question, right? And this after the comma is the second part of the question. The first part of the question is answered by the asterisks, okay, in 348.22. The second part is by the table, okay, and that told us that it was 4 THHNs to go in there with the additional equipment ground. But to answer the question, it's only 4, okay? All right, next question we have is for Class 1, Division 1 and 2, the minimum thickness of the sealing compound shall not be less than the trade size of the fitting, or in no case less than blank inches. So we're looking for inches, not feet, inches. All right. So first thing that I would tell students on this one all the time is take a little time and get familiar with the different hazardous locations. So you have what's called a Class 1, Class 2, Class 3. Class 1 is for flammable vapors, things like that, flammable liquids, things like that. That is where you'll run into a class 1. Class 2, you're dealing with combustible gases and dust. Combustible dust. Class 1 is gases and vapors. 2 is combustible dust. And 3 is flyings and fibers, things like that. Okay, getting familiar with that. Here we go. Steve Bradley from Massachusetts. Hey, you're on the East Coast. Good morning. What's up, Judge? Good morning. Good morning. Where are you from? Let us know where you're from. Kansas City. There we go. I see you now. Kansas City. All right. Well, welcome to the stream. We'll be doing a lot more streaming. I promised everybody now that we've moved to Virginia and the studios are here on the East Coast, we have a lot more shows and segments coming up and a lot more interviews. And we're going to actually have some stuff out in the field. So get excited about that. You're actually going to see me strap on the tool belt and show you some stuff from out in the field to show you that I still have a little bit of skill left in me. So anyway, we're excited about that. And that's something new that we'll be doing, especially for 2025 in the field stuff. So, all right. So let's look this one up. So first things first, we know we're dealing with the class 1. So you need to get familiar with the different classes. So 500 is hazardous location, and 500 is your general catch-all. A lot of general information about hazardous locations in 500. When you get to 501, you're talking very specifically about combustible vapors and gases, okay? And it's broken up into 2 divisions, Division 1, and we have zones as well, which is more European, but it's getting more popular here in the US, and it's in the NEC. But generally, you have what's called Division 1 and Division 2. And Division 2 is less stringent than Division 1. If something meets Division 1, then it can be used in Division 2. Okay, but not everything that listed for Division 2 can be in the more stringent Division 1. Okay, so kind of remember that when it comes to division hierarchy. Division 1 is where the risk is always present. And then division number 2 is it's only present in a rupture or an accident or things like that. So that's an easy way to remember the classifications, okay? So anything that's Division 1 is going to be way more stringent than Division 2 would be, okay? All right, so that's the first thing. Now, dissecting this. So let's assume that you've done your due diligence, you've worked through a program, and you understand that your Class 1 is you're dealing in Article 501, okay? The next thing you need to focus on is, what are we talking about? We're talking about the sealing, the seal-offs between, let's say, Division 1 to Division 2, or from Division 2s or Division 1s into non-classified areas, okay? So there's got to be seal-offs, or inside of Division 1s, you have certain requirements for where you have equipment that's going to create an arc, then you're going to want to have a seal-off within so many inches and whatnot. So we're dealing with seals. Okay, so that's one thing to remember, because if I'm trying to dissect this down for an exam question, I've already broken this down. I know I'm dealing with Class 1, so I'm in 501. I'm also dealing with Division 1 and Division 2, and it's talking about the seal compounds, sealing. Okay, and lastly, you'll notice here that it's talking about the minimum thickness of that sealing compound. All right. And then you'll see that it's giving me values, 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch, okay? Giving me all these values. Those are triggers to remember when now I'm going to go look at the NEC. But first, I need to know what we're talking about. And we're talking about seals, okay, in the sealing compound. So let's go to the NEC. And we're going to go on and get down, and I'll show you the hierarchy really quickly. So if you see here in 500, it's special occupancies. You see 500. That is hazardous classified locations, Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, Division 1, Division 2. That's your overall. That's your go-to for all the general requirement stuff that you would have. And then, of course, specifically, here's Article 501. Now, obviously, it's easy in Link. To do this is you can go down and you can see that as you go down through here, you see here it says seals and drainage. But if I was bold scanning, because we're not using the index here, because we don't have an index version, then what I would be doing is I would be taking it and I would be bold scanning quickly, looking for seals, the term seals, things like that. So here, nothing. All right, that's the wiring method. And again, you see that's broken down into what's allowed in a Class 1 Division 1. It's a little more stringent than what you may have in a Class 1 Division 2, okay? But they're not talking about seals yet, all right? We're getting down. There's different boxes. Okay, right here. Seals and drainage, 115. Sealing popped up pretty quickly, okay? Now we're going down. There's A, conduit seals. And then we got 2, all right? Conduit body seals. Okay. And now, here's the big difference. You remember the question? Let me bring you back real quick. So this was seals specifically for Class 1 Division 2, right? And this one was seals for Class 1 Division 1. Remember our question. The question says for Class 1 Division 1 and Division 2. So this is something that covers both. It's not specific to Division 1 versus Division 2. This is covering them both. So we're going to skip past that. We're going to go down to the one that's going to cover both. Right here. Class 1, Division 1, and 2. All right, and now we're going to think about the question. And that was the compound, the thicknesses. All right, so we get down here, but we're also remembering the answers because the answers were giving us values. And that's important as you're bold scanning. Remember parts of the question and jump to that right away. Boom, thickness of the compound. Here we read it and we see 5/8 of an inch. Okay. And then we're like, okay, that makes sense. And that's the answer. The question was, and we'll take us back, and it's talking about what? The minimum thickness of the compound. All right, and so we know that that was 5/8. So we click it, and there's our reference, 501.15C1, and that compound, the thickness of the sealing compound minimum, okay, no less than 5/8 of an inch. Regardless of the sealing requirements of where you have to have seals, this is about the compound that's applicable to both Division 1 and Division 2. So you really have to study the question and look and see what it's asking, that type of thing. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I'm more than happy. I'll bring it up on the screen and try to answer it for you. If anybody's struggling on an exam, want some tips, want me to talk about the way that you do it, the wave method, 3 waves, I'm more than happy to discuss that. Hopefully you've watched that video. I know it's coffee hour and I'm drinking Diet Coke because my coffee maker is in the pod, still traveling from Texas. We literally have nothing here. Although my studio is set up, the rest of the house, nothing. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next question here. Remember, you can post your answers in the comments if you want. You want to chime in, feel free to do so. I hope the stream is going okay because this is also a test for me using Starlink as our internet provider. So hopefully everything's going okay. If it is, give me a thumbs up. Let me know that everything's streaming okay. All right. The next we have is, in general, a power supply cord to a mobile home shall be rated blank amps. Okay. So first of all, when I look at a question like this, I don't have to go very far. If you've been doing your flashcards, and there are flashcards in the new program, people don't know that it's there, but you have to go into the bonus material to get the flashcards. If you've been learning the different articles, you'll know that when you're dealing with mobile homes, and of course, in that one's easy to go to the index because you go to index and you look under mobile homes. It'll tell you that it's Article 550 for mobile homes. And the question is specifically to the power supply cord, okay? Not service, permanent service. This is a power supply cord. Just keep it simple. Don't overthink it, all right? And it's asking that it has to have a rating of what? 40, 50, 80, or 60. Now, you may already know this answer. Good. If you're doing an exam prep or you're in an exam and you know the answer right away, go on and mark it and move on. You just bought yourself a bunch of time that you can spend on a harder question. But we're going to look it up, and obviously we're going to be in mobile home. Now, under mobile home in the index, it might say power supply cord. You might look up power supply cord. Remember, when you're studying for the NEC exam, or if you just want to get better at the NEC and maybe you already have your license, but you want to know how to get better, the best way to do something is to dissect and look in the index. See what's there so that you know what's there and what's not there. So in this case, I might look up power supply cord in the index. I definitely would look under mobile home and then look under the hierarchy of mobile home and see if it says anything about power supply cords. Those type of things. It's just going to make you better the more you do it. All right. So in our case, I'm going to go to 550 and I'm going to bold scan because what I'm looking for specifically is power supply cords, and I'm using the answers to help me point out as I'm bold scanning. That's so important to use the answers in an exam. So let me go and get us there. Let's get to 550. Okay, so here you see 550 right here. And of course, we could go right here. You see this says power supply right here, but we're bold scanning. Get used to bold scanning. And here's scope, general requirements. Remember our answers? Okay, power supply. Okay. So in this case right here, you've got A. Says the power supply to the mobile home shall be a feeder assembly consisting of not more than one listed 50 amp mobile home power supply cord. Right? There's your answer. That quick. Bold scanning took us all of seconds. Now, again, you may have already known the answer, but again, that's a quick way to get bold scanning is probably the best way to do it if you don't just know the answer. Now, if you're in the Fast Tracks program, you probably already knew this answer because we talk about it in our program. I don't remember what unit it is, but we talk about it. But this is a quick way to get that answer. Okay, so we go back here and we click 50. And there is our resource, 550.10a. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering where these questions come from, they're in our Fast Tracks program under the bonus material. You have to go all the way to the bottom of your unit list and you'll see it. The reason we put it at the bottom is because when students are in our program, we don't want them doing these questions right away. We want them to gain the knowledge by going through the program before they start doing questions. It's just going to help them not get confused. All right. Next question we have. It says, for an outdoor fuel dispensing device, okay, so it's like a gas pump, right? Pull up a gas pump. It says the area 18 inches above grade level and 20 inches horizontal from the enclosure would be a class blank division blank location. Okay. Well, these are one of those easiest ones to at least narrow down because we know by our studying that a class 2 is combustible dust, and we're not talking about dust. Class 3 is talking about ignitable, flammable flyings and fibers. So we've already narrowed this down right here. Okay, so it's either this answer or this answer. So even if on an exam, you have narrowed it down, you at least have a 50-50, okay, to that point, right? So that's good. That's a tip. Now, since we know we're dealing with what? Outdoor fuel dispensing, then we happen to also know that there is an article that deals with it. Now, if you didn't, you could go to the table of contents and look down, or you could look in the index under fuel dispensing, that type of thing, and motor fuel dispensing, those type of things. And that, I encourage you to do that. I can't do that here because we don't have index available on link, but that's what you want to do. You want to go back and forth and look in these type of things. All right, but then we're going to go to the NEC and we're going to see what it would look like here. So if I went to the table of contents and we would look here, and I will notice right here that 514. And the good thing about these trainings is that you'll forever remember that motor fuel dispensing facilities has its own article in 514. And you hit it. Now, in our scenario, I'm going to bold scan because it's not a massively large article. And I'm looking for classifications. All right, so this brings us to classifications of locations. Right here. All right, and here's our dispensing. And here's the little grid, and here's what it looks like. All right, so remember what we said in the question? We'll look at the question really quickly again. Okay, so the area 18 inches above the grade and 20 inches horizontal would be what? Okay, let's go back to the tab. So here we see 18 inches right here in the question. Here's 18 inches. Okay, 18 inches all around. Okay, and then out 20. Okay, and you see these hashes. Okay, and it looks like it is a Class 1 Division 2 location. Okay. Makes sense? It really is that simple, and sometimes people can make things extremely complicated, right? Now, here you see below grade, it's Class 1 Division 1, but our question was, go back to the question, our question was here, above grade level. And that's what that illustration is dictating right here. This is the above grade level. And you see the 18 reference, everything around it. So obviously in this scenario, it is what? It is a Class 1 Division 2. So let's go back here. There it is. 514.3B1. And we can also, if we didn't look at the chart, we can actually we got the answer from looking at the figure, but we can actually go to the chart, the table. Let's do that just so we can see. So here's the location. So this is it even another type of chart. Here you see 18 inches, same scenario. Let's see if we go down to B1. Here's the Class 1 location. So here's the table. It does it as well. And let's show you what this looks like. Let's see here. See if I can blow this thing up, if it'll get bigger for us. Okay. Hard to see it. I can move it left. I can't really move it left or right. So it's hard for you to see it. Okay. But if I look at the one, let's see if I can bring it back down. Okay, so we'll start from the left side here. It makes it a little easier. So we're looking at dispensing device, okay? And it is right here, dispenser, right? And you go to the right, and it's division. So here it is, Division 2, and it's right there. So we already know that it is Class 1 because it's fuel. And then when you come down here, the question was about the dispenser, right? And that's where you get the 2 right here. Now, again, we got it quickly from just looking at this figure because the figures make it nice and easy. But if you go down to the table, you'll see that we're dealing with dispenser device, okay? And it didn't say anything about being an overhead type. And it was the dispenser. And here you see its division is Division 2. And it's just that easy to do it, okay? So we got that answer right, and that's our code reference. Okay, the next question is, the total degree in bends in a conduit run shall not exceed blank degrees between pull points. Every electrician that does commercial work, maybe you're residential and you may not know this, but every electrician knows this. Between box to box, box to cabinet, you can only have a certain number of bends, and they have to total less than a total value of 490s, which 90 times 4 is 360. So it's a total of 360 degrees worth of bends between pull points, and you can't exceed that. So if you're about to do that, then you need to put in another pull box, and you need to size pull boxes properly, right? 314.28, make sure you size them properly if you have to add one in, but you can't have more than 360 degrees of bends between point A and point B if you have two different pull boxes, or from a cabinet panel to a box. Can't have more than 360 degrees worth of bends, okay? So now this answer here, you could find this answer in any of the articles you were to go to. So for us, let's just say that we're dealing with, because it's the same for all of them when it comes to this. So let's go to rigid metal conduit, right? So if I were to go to rigid metal conduit, right, and I'm going to go back up here just to show you, and we'll go to rigid metal. And let's see here, rigid metal conduit, 344. And I'm bold scanning because you're looking for bends, right? Sizing, number of conductors, bends, right there, 334. Also remember, dot 24 is your bends for most of your raceway applications. It's bends, right? And here you see total number right here. The total degree of bends in a conduit run shall not exceed 360 degrees between pull points. And I don't know if it doesn't show a picture, but so that's your maximum. And so that's basically 490s. Now, one thing that I will tell people that they forget is that you do have to account for offsets, whether it's 22 degree offsets, changing in elevation bends like a kick. You have to count all of that. So it's not just the 90s. A lot of people ask that question. They'll go, do we count all the degrees? Absolutely. If there's a bend that's placed in the conduit, you have to account for it. So again, offsets, kicks, all those, it's important. You have to know the degrees because you can't exceed 360. And the reason for that is because as you're pulling the conductors through, you have the sidewall pressure that rubs along the inner side of the conductors pulling through the raceways, and it puts stress on that insulation. And if you put too much stress on the insulation, it just causes it to split, and that kind of defeats the purpose. So you want to make sure that you're not going to be putting that pressure on it. And it's been determined that as long as you don't exceed 360 degrees worth of bends between pull points, that's not going to be an issue. Okay. So the answer is 360. And there's your reference. This one happens to be, oh, well, there you go. It happens to be 344. And we were in 344.24. So there you go. That's rigid. But remember, it also would apply to PVC. It would also apply to intermediate conduit, that type of thing. All right, another question here. All right. Oh, this is one that some people get wrong as well or get confused with. It says the width of clear working space in front of 120 volt electrical equipment shall be the width of the equipment or blank, whichever is greater. Okay. So the width, we're talking about the width of the working space in front of 120 volt electrical equipment shall be the width of the equipment or blank, whichever is greater. 3 feet, 24, 30 inches, or 3.5 feet. Okay. Actually, this is not the one that most people have trouble in. This should be pretty easy because, again, this is dealing with working clearance. So it's a general requirement that you have for this one. And so where's general requirements held? General installation requirements, that's all in 110. And you probably were real familiar with working clearances. And typically the working clearances that we're talking about is the depth from the equipment, the width that the equipment must be placed in, the door has to open up at least 90 degrees, okay? And you have headroom requirements. All of that is found in Article 110. Now, back in the index, you could look for triggers. You could look under working clearance. Okay, so you look under working space, look under working clearance, if that's familiar with you. All these things you should be looking up to see how is the index say it. There's an index guide that was put out years ago by Tom Henry, and it's a great keyword index, and it almost has every thought of how you would say something in it. The problem is most test locations won't let you use that. And the more information you have, sometimes it can slow you down because you sit there thinking you're going to find the perfect answer to send you where you need to be. Nothing is going to take the place of just putting in the time and learning. When I read this question, this is a working space requirement. It is a general. Some people will think, ooh, let me go to panels. That's not what it said. It didn't say panel board, switchboard. It said working clearance in front of 120 volt electrical equipment. Okay, so that should put you in the general requirements, and that should help you realize that it is going to be in 110. Now, 110 is rather large, but when it comes to working clearances, that pops up at you pretty quickly, and I'll show you. Let's go to the index. Let's go to the code. And you'll see right here that it says 110. Oh, you can't see it. I don't have it down far enough. But this is titled Article 110, General Requirements for Electrical Installations. So this is a general requirement. Now I'm going to bold scan. Scope, approval, examination, the old familiar 110.3b, voltage, conductors, conductor sizes, wire integrity, interruptive rating, deteriorating agents. Okay, go down through mechanical workmanship, connections. Remember, we're looking for working clearances, high leg markings, flash markings. Just kind of go through identification of disconnecting means. It's not what we're looking at. Available fault current, lockable disconnects, not what we're looking at. Okay, right here. Space about electrical equipment, working space. Right there, okay? So when we read this, we'll look at this and say, okay, first one is working space, right here, okay? Depth of the working space, not what we're asking. Width of the working space, that's what we're asking. Didn't take us but a few seconds to get there. And I'll also immediately see that it throws out 30 inches. And of course, you heard me make the reference to the door being opening at least 90 degrees. But that was the trigger. We use the answers to also trigger us because there are some people that might have stopped back here and saw this 24 inches and just didn't read the whole question and just simply started answering the questions. No, that's just what we call the charging statement. This is the start of an article. This is the charging statement. You got to get down to specifics, and this is the width of that working space. And it's 30 inches. So we come back here, and the width of the equipment of the working space, again, 30 inches is what we want. Right there. Reference 110.26A2. Okay. So if I'm studying with this one, working clearance, working space, all those are trigger words. Remember the answers and really look at what it's going for. What's interesting to people is that this is 120 volt and it applies the same for 120 or 240. Again, your normal panel, for example, all those type of things. It applies generally. So don't be thrown by the fact that it might say just 120 on it. Okay. Those rules, and I'll show you these rules in here. The only thing that's voltage specific, okay, is the depth of the working space. Okay. You have 3 different conditions to be aware of. Incidentally, I wouldn't say it's a tip, but I'll say that here's where people get screwed. If I ask you what the depth of the working space was for a 240 volt, 120, 240 volt panel, I know, and I tell you that it is just a condition 1, exposed live parts on one side and not behind you. So it's just a normal panel you guys work in every day. And I told you that it was a 120, 240 volt. A lot of students would come here and I want to know what the working space is. Even though the answer is going to be the same, you have to be very careful because the questions on exams will typically jack up the size or the voltage and whatnot. And I'll give you an example. So if it's a simple 120, 240 volt panel and I ask you what the depth of the working space, and that is the space in front of it from live parts to work on it, you'll notice here that you have 0 to 150, you have 151 to 600. A lot of people get confused and is they look at that and they think they're going to use the 240. You're not. Notice what it says. It says nominal voltage to ground. So only one of those legs, okay, so it's 120. So it's 240 between it. It's 120 to ground. Each separate leg to ground is 120, but between them is 240. You're using the one leg to ground as your value here, okay, because that's where you're going to typically have your fault, okay, something gets grounded out, and you need that clearance. All right, so here, 0 to 150 is going to apply to a 120 240 volt panel. Now, why I bring this up is because sometimes exam questions will do something like it's a 277 480 volt panel. What's the working clearance? Okay, so under condition 1, they're the same, 3 feet. 3 feet, okay? That's under condition 1. Typically on exams, they'll try to throw something out there like condition 2, okay? So condition 2 is going to be exposed live parts on one side of the working space. That's the space you're working on, right? And grounded parts on the other side of the working space. So like you have concrete wall behind you, right? And then you have a panel in front of you. Maybe you're in a little niche or whatever. Or it's going to be how they give you the question on the exam, right? They'll tell you that it's a conductive wall or whatever. You got to be careful. Because when you come in here, again, the reason I bring this up is because you see the 151 to 600, that 277 is what we're looking for in a 480 volt panel. That's the part, the 277 is the ground. Now, if I had a panel that was pure 480 and it had no 277 in it, then you would still be in this one because then that would be 480 to ground. But be careful when you're looking at this and you can see the differences because of and say it's a condition 2 and it's a 122 40 volt panel. You can make a big mistake in coming in here and saying it's 3 feet 6 inches when, again, a 122 40 volt, it's still going to only be 3 feet of working space, even though it is a condition 2. But you see it changes if it was a 277 480, because in that case, it would fall in this one, and not because of the 480, but because of the 277, because that's what's to ground, and that would be 3 feet 6 inches. So just be careful when you're looking at these. When it comes to the depth of the working space, that is voltage specific, and it's any one line to ground. Now, again, be hypersensitive to the fact that if it's a 122 40, 277 480, it's going to be the lower value, which is to ground, and that's what you're going to use here. If it's a 480 straight, then it's 480 to ground. And so again, just be careful that it's nominal voltage to ground, not between phases, okay? What do we got here this morning? Fernando, good morning. From Dallas, passed my journeyman's last week with your course. Thank you. Congratulations. I got to have applause for that. Hold on. Where's my applause here? Where is my applause? There we go. Congratulations. In Dallas. I just left Texas. No, I'm now in Virginia, but man, congratulations. It's always an amazing feeling to get that done and achieve that success. You know, I tell people all the time, you can go do work your whole life and not be licensed, right? And people ask me, what does it feel like to get your license? I mean, you might be able to work your whole career for somebody and never need to get a license, but I'm a big believer that it's not always about the money. It's about the fact that we want to keep moving forward. We want to keep learning. We're only here a short amount of time. Knowledge is king. I want to be smarter than the guy next to me. It's constantly learning. So you should always be striving to get licensed, always. Even if you're in a place that doesn't have statewide licensing, local licensing, strive to do it because it feels good. You've achieved something. You've tested yourself. All right. So anyway, what do we got here? DT says, are you familiar with the ICC exams? Yes. So the E1s, E2s, and E3s are basically based on their own I codes, except for the E1 uses the International Residential Code, which basically mirrors the NEC. So I usually tell people to study the NEC and realize that most of the stuff that you're going to find in the ICC's E1s, you can find in the NEC. Now, if you have a residential, International Residential Code book, then it usually has a cross-reference guide. So it cross-references the NEC references. And so that type of thing. But most of the students that I teach for ICC exams that do E1 for residential, I teach them to use the NEC. And the reason for that is because most of them are going to go get the E2. And the E2 is going to be commercial. And the E2 uses the NEC, right? So you might as well get familiar with the NEC. So I hate somebody to study the residential code for electrical and then turn around and have to relearn the NEC to do the E2. And of course, the E3 is plan review, electrical plans examiner, and that's going to be based on the NEC anyway. So I tell people all the time, it's better to, even though the I codes, the ICC exams, basically the E1 uses the IRC, but the IRC has chapters that are loaded with NEC references. There is a guide in there to help you cross-reference. But if you really study the NEC well, you'll have no problem answering the questions in the ICC exam. And of course, when you get to E2 and E3, you're going to need to know the NEC anyway. So the I codes are basically, the ICC exams are basically based on that. I have my E1, E2, and E3. I passed those. And I never once opened up the International Residential Code for that. Now, I had to learn the International Residential Code because I was a head of jurisdictions in Northern Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia. So I oversaw all of the inspections, and I had certifications in residential, plumbing, mechanical, building, all this stuff. Not that I liked it, but I had to do it. That was my job, that type of thing. So yeah, I'm very familiar with ICC, and so that should, hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. Ron, out in the wild west out there. Morning. Well, my friend, I am thankful that you're in our program and that you're working through the CMECP program, and I appreciate your friendship as well. And hopefully you're getting along. I've successfully moved Ron to Virginia. I'm in the new studio. Don't have the green screen up, so I'm using virtual, but podcast studio is almost done, so we can do a lot more podcasts. I want to do weekly podcasts, maybe even twice a week, and a lot more videos over on our Fast Tracks tube. So we're underway. We finally got moved, and life is good. Can't complain. But again, I appreciate your friendship as well, my friend. All right, let's get into some more code questions. All right. Let's go. Let me get you back here. All right. Let's look at this question here. It says, though a or a blank THH conductor in a conduit is restricted to 55 amps of current, for derating purposes, the insulation value is blank amps. Okay. So this one, to answer this question, you got to remember and say, okay, where am I going to go for this? Well, the easiest way to go for this is obviously to go to the ampacity tables, right? And look and see what our options are for the answers, right? So we have answers on the screen, and what we're looking for is a conductor that is rated for 55 amps. That's the restriction, okay? But then we're looking and seeing, but for derating purposes, we typically can use what? A higher temperature rating. Okay, so the easiest way to answer this question for anybody is don't try to commit any of this to memory. Just go to the ampacity tables. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to go to the ampacity tables, 31016. And let's go to the ampacity tables. Give me a second. I'll get us there. All right, so here is our 31016. I will go on and try to expand this out so we can see it a little bit. All right, we can see it a little bit, but you can't see the left side of it. So let me drop it down a little bit. So we really don't need the left side. All we need is this part of it. Okay, because we're dealing with, I think the question was about, let's see here. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I know. Oh, hold on. Let me go back. I got something I want to tell you. Let me get you back to here real quick. Got something I want to tell you. Okay, so let's narrow this question down first because I get this on exam. We're going to narrow this down. Okay, what do I always tell everybody? What does the code say? You always assume copper unless stated otherwise. So in this question, it said THHN. It didn't say anything about copper or aluminum, so we always assume what? Oh, by the way, if you haven't noticed, I'm standing. I love my new desk that allows me to stand because, you know, fat boy here has got to get some exercise. So I say that, but I lost nearly 70 pounds. I don't know if you can tell. I look scruffy, but I've lost quite a bit of weight. No, I'm not sick. I do have diabetes. That's the first thing somebody asked me. Paul, are you sick? I'm not sick. I just, lost weight because I needed to lose weight. That type of thing. So, all right. So anyway, where was I at? Okay. So here's the thing I'm pointing out. We can narrow this question down immediately to a 50-50 on an exam. We know we're not talking about aluminum. Because, again, you always assume copper unless stated otherwise. The question didn't say anything about anything, so we're assuming copper, right? So we can throw these two out. So it's either 8 or it's either 6, okay, to deal with this 55 amps that's the restricted value, okay? So let's go back to the code. So we said 8. Now, why are we under 60? Now, here's the 90. Oops, hold on, let me get it down here. Here's the 90, and here's the 60. People will ask me why we're not under 75. Even though it says THHN in the 90, okay, over here, right here, why are we in the 60? Well, because of those little limitations in 110.14c that says what? If it's 100 amps or less, right? Then you're going to be in the 60. Or if you're 14 through 1 gauge, you're going to be in the 60. If you're over 100, you're going to be in the 75. So based on our question, we weren't given terminal. We just have to go with the general understanding of the knowledge of the NEC, which is 110.14. You learn this in our program, and guess what? If you have not watched my derating demystified video over on Fast Track's Tube, make sure you go watch it. And if you're not a subscriber to the Fast Track's Tube, I would recommend you subscribe before the first of the year because the pricing will go up. And right now it's $99 a year, but I'm going to give you a coupon. It's 50 OFF, 50 OFF, all caps, will get you 50% off the annual subscription, and that'll roll you into next year, and you won't be subject to any increases. And you're going to get all the new content that's going to be rolling out as of January that I've been telling you about. And other stuff that we're adding, and all of our podcasts are going to be moving over there. So again, it's just going to be a much nicer platform for you. And it's like the YouTube, but we think it's a better platform. And we're going to be exclusive to electrical and in the field stuff. I'm going to strap on the belt and get out in the field and do some field videos. We're going to do some product reviews in Lowe's and Home Depots and look at electrical products and break it down. And I'll even talk about the internals of certain products. We're going to really add stuff to the channel, but we're going to be doing it over on Fast Track's Tube, so make sure you subscribe to that. All right, so anyway, let's look right here. So the reason that we're at 60 is because we're under 100 amps because it's 55 amps. It said that in the question. So all you really have to do is that's the restriction. So you go down here till you find the 55 amp one right there, and that's the 6. And then you quantify it because the derating and the adjustment and correction gets to take place from the 90, and that is 75. So if you go back to the question, here's the 60, and here's the 75. So this can only be your answer. And we eliminated these two, and we had a 50-50. Now, what about the 8? Well, the 8, and it says 8 and 40. Well, if you go back to the code and we look here, here's 8. That is not right because that's the 40, but the derating value is 55. And in the question, it's talking about the derating value as being 40. So that is absolutely not correct. So the only answer can be 6. And again, table 31016. So you see how we kind of use the table, and I gave you a little lesson on the terminal and temperature limitations when 110.14c. All those things we cover in our program. But again, go watch Derating Demystified Anybody in here in the room watched it? Have y'all seen Derating Demystified? What do you think of that video? Very detailed. I get into details of the conductors and ampacities and everything. Anybody seen that video? Let me know. All right, another question. Okay, meter sockets shall not be considered service equipment, but shall be listed and rated for the blank rating of the service. Now, we all know that the code is very clear that the meter that you put the meter socket in, so the meter cabinet, that is not service equipment. It's never treated as service equipment. Basically, it's simply a pass-through device, okay? It simply is somewhere that they put this meter in there to, unfortunately, charge us money for the use of electricity. I would love for it to be free. God bless Tesla. But at the end of the day, that is not service equipment. And that is so important to remember as you get on, because we'll have other rules about service equipment and everything, and the meter sockets do not apply to that rule. Although it is electrical equipment, and it does apply to the clearances and working clearances and all those kind of stuff in 110, it doesn't apply to the same things that you would have like for services, panel boards, things like that. Okay, so it's not service equipment. All right, so meter socket itself has to do what? It's still it's not considered service equipment, but in this question, it works in conjunction with service equipment, all right? So, and we also have to realize that it's saying all these things about service. So, I mean, you could have a meter on a feeder to a separate building. It could be separate tenant metering. But in this question, there's enough references about service that we know that this is a meter socket that pertains to a precursor to getting to the service. So we know that it's going to be where? It's going to be in 230. That's where it's going to be, right? Now, 230 can be rather large, but we're looking for something very specific. We're looking for references to meter sockets. So let's go and do our bold scan. And we're going to be in 230 because that's service. Now, if we look down the left here to see what we've got for services, just to kind of zoom down and look at these things, and I encourage you to do this. As somebody that's learning the code, you want to go down and, okay, so the one that intrigues me is the marking, because the question was asking about, listed and rated. So that kind of sends up red flags to me that it's listed and rated. That's going to have, I need to know what's on it. It needs to be marked. Otherwise, how do I know what's on it? So that'd be one place to start. But we're going to use bold scanning, and we're going to be looking for things like meter sockets and references to meter sockets and see how quickly we can find it. And we're going to use a bold scanning technique, and we're going to move quickly through the bold scan. So let's go on and get here, and I'll get us to 230. And we're going to give it a shot here. All right, so we're looking for meter sockets. Now, one of the things that you could do if we looked down is, do we see anything in this little hierarchy here that would help us get there? Okay, nothing really here because all this is service stuff. And it probably gets you generalized somewhere since we're talking about service, not service equipment, but things associated with service equipment. We might be able to get there. But I'm going to bold scan. Number of services, irrelevant. More than one building, not what we're talking about. Outside the building, not what we're talking about. Other conductors, nope. Ceiling of the raceway, nope. Clearance of the building, nope. Vegetation, nope. Sizing, nope. Sizing, clearances, nope. See how quickly we're scanning the bolds? Point of attachment, nope. Means of attachment, nope. Surface mass, nope. Support, nope. All right, we're in underground now. Installation, nope, nope. Sizing, nope. Protection of damage, splice conductors, okay. Service inch conductors, nope. Installation of those conductors, nope. Ampacity of those conductors, nope. Wiring methods, nope. Cable trays, nope. Splicing and tap, nope. You do learn stuff, folks, by bolt scanning, believe it or not. Mounts, nope. Individual conductor, nope. Raceway, nope. Overhead service locations, nope. Service conductors, the higher voltage ground? Nope. Okay. Equipment. Remember we said we could have jumped probably to service equipment and it got us in the area because this meter pertains or a precursor or ahead of service equipment. All right. But that's not what we're looking at. So here's markings. Boom. Meter socket. There was our trigger word. You probably could have gone to the index and looked under meter sockets, under services. It might have been an offset. It might have said meter sockets, whatever. But the first thing that I see here is it says meter sockets shall not be considered service equipment. That is so important, especially when you get to something like 230.85 for that emergency disconnect and rules. You'll realize that a meter is not service equipment, but shall be listed and rated for the voltage and current rating of the circuit. So it needs to be listed for the voltage and current, okay? Not current and power. It says voltage and current. Again, I'll take you back right here. Voltage and current right there. So voltage and current, there's our reference, 230.66b. So that was just an example of us breaking it down, and we bold scanned. Now, as you get better at it, you'll be able to hit those bolds really quickly looking for the trigger word that's within the actual question. So then it doesn't matter how badly the question is written. If you use those triggers and use your table of contents, then, your index, and of course you could use your table of contents to try to get you where you need to be. But I think bold scanning is powerful. Now there's the beautiful thing. Let me explain why people do a structured. And Ron, if you want to chime in, you can. But I want to explain something to people why I believe in a structured program versus just grabbing a code book and flipping it. And this is not a sales piece. I'm not trying to sell you anything when I make this statement. I'm just saying fact. A structured program walks you through the most important parts. It's not going to cover everything. It walks you through the most important parts of studying so that you're not just flipping through a code book, hoping that you're going to retain the information. When you go through a structured program, what it does, it allows you to lock certain things into your memory as you go through them so that when you start getting into the practices of bold scanning, a lot of the stuff you've learned, right, while you're in your program, you've learned it. So things will come to you as you're going through the different exam questions, and you'll remember it. And as you go into the code book, you bold. Now that's the importance of what's called structured training. Sadly, I have a lot of students that just get a code book and they start flipping through the code book and they start looking, or they just use code questions. It's much harder to use just code questions. Because you're not learning something along the way to help you with those code questions. So that's why structured programs that are broken down into units, I don't want commentary from other people when you're doing it. We want specific information, and it gives you code references so that you can go to it in your code book, back into your program, into your code book, back into your program, into the code book. By going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you'll start to remember these things. And it's a process of repetition. And then that's why I also, folks, put the questions in our program at the bottom of your course. Not the competencies, you do that at the end of each unit, but the actual database, I put at the bottom. The reason for that is I don't want people running to do the questions first. Because again, the questions will become easier to maneuver, easier to answer as you go through the course and answer those competency reviews. That's the fast track system. It doesn't matter what I use. It doesn't matter if I rewrote it from scratch. It doesn't matter. That's just code. The way that it's delivered and the method to study, that's what makes people be successful. And not just at passing an exam, but remembering it when you're in the field. That means a lot to be able to regurgitate something when you're out in the field, okay? So that wasn't supposed to sound like a sales pitch, but I'm sure my haters will say it was a sales pitch. I'm sure. All right. Let's look at another question. Oh, and by the way, all of these questions are available. There's literally over, I think, 700 plus that are available in your console, plus the ones that are your competency reviews. So in our program, that's over 1,000 questions to hone your skills while you're learning the program. All right, next. All right, remember what we talked about earlier? We already have learned something here. Class 1, Division 1 location, conduit seals shall be installed within blank inches of the enclosure. All right. So what did we learn here? Well, we've already learned what? That Class 1 is flammable gases and vapors. We got it. We also learned earlier that Class 1 for flammable gases and vapors is in Article 501. And we learned that Division 1 is more restrictive than Division 2. So this one, remember the earlier when we looked for the seals, we were in what? We were looking at something that was generic thickness for Division 1 and 2, but this is not. This one is those specific seal requirements for Class 1, Division 1. And remember earlier, where were seals at? It was in Section 15 of Article 501. Now, the reason I bring this up is another way for you to get familiar is just to remember 501, think of 1 for Class 1. 502, think of 2 for Class 2. 503, think of 3 for Class 3. 500, think of it as a catch-all that has a lot of information about all of those different classes in one location. This is specific to a Class 1 Division 1, and it's specific to the seals. So by now, you're probably familiar with this has got to be located in 501.15 because 15 is the seals section within 501. Okay, so we're going to go there. And even if it wasn't obvious, because maybe you came in late and we did that earlier in our session today, let's go on. And I apologize. I know some of you are thinking, why didn't I get a notice? In the future, these will be noticed so that you can see that it's at a scheduled time. I just was feeling like maybe let's just do some live. I want to test the studio out, test the stream. And so I just did it. Okay, so we're in 501, right here, 501, right here. And we're in the scope. Now, if I'm bold scanning again, I'm looking for what? I'm looking for seals. Now, I'm probably going to do this. And when I know it's 501, 502, 503, before I'm even going to go to the index, because I know that 501 is not large, and I know that I'm looking for something specific, like seals. So here's the 501, here's the zone, here's the wiring methods. All right, 501 there. Okay, here we go, seals. Seals right here, dot 15. Now, in my scenario, we're very specific because it's asking about the seal for Class 1 Division 1, right? It didn't ask for Division 1, Division 2. It didn't ask for Division 2. Just asked for Class 1, Division 1. Now, remember in the question, this is why I said think about it for an exam. Think about what's in the answers. So in the answer, we're given 24, 18, 30, and 36. These are our answers. So one of the things to get used is to train yourself that once you're here and you know you're talking about seals, that now you can be hyper-focused on your answer options, 24, 18, 30, or 36. So I scroll down and I'm looking here and I see distances and I'm looking for distances right here. First time I run at anything, it says 18 inches right here. Okay. Nowhere else do I see anything in here about distance. And it says conduit seals shall be installed within 18 inches from the enclosure. All right, 18 inches. Let's go back to this. It shall be installed within blank inches of the enclosure. Well, it's obvious to us that it's 18 inches. And there's our code reference, 501.15a1. You see how we did it? See how we broke it down? We knew by now, and you're studying, you know that it's Class 1 is 501. You knew it's Division 1, which is more restricted than Division 2. And we're looking specifically for conduit seals. And it's in relative to an enclosure. So and we use the answers to pinpoint it once we got where we needed to be. So it takes a little bit to get familiar with doing this and remembering but it also trains your brain to remember. In other words, reading a question, thinking about the key parts, then looking in the code and remembering those key parts so that they stick out to you as you bold scan. That is probably one of the most important methods of being successful on an exam, but also in the real world. When you're out there doing it, using that technique will help you find your answer quicker. Time is money. All right, look at another question. The length of free conductor extending beyond the opening of a junction box shall be, okay? You're like, okay, so this is free conductor. You've heard us talking about what is free conductor? It's the conductors we need to make up splices, to make up joints in a junction box. We need to have a certain amount of conductor, all right? So this is a general requirement. So because this is going to apply very broadly. So this is going to be under general requirements of wiring methods and materials. General requirement. Now, you could also go to the index and probably look for something, it probably says free conductor. Look under that type of thing. Again, this is one of those that you just have to look at and go, wait a minute, that's a general requirement when it comes to the wiring methods and the materials and the conductors. That's a general requirement. So we're going to go to the NEC. And here we're in the NEC and we're at 300. And 300 is titled right here. You see it. It says general requirements for wiring methods and material. Material being the conductors itself. The wiring method being whatever the raceway, the cable assembly, whatever it would be. And also under chapter 3, that covers all of your raceways, cable types, all those type of things are also covered under chapter 3. All right, but we're just looking at 300. So let's bold scan down, and what we're looking for is free conductor. So it's specific about free conductor. So let's so here's your limitations, here's your conductors, but it's not, remember the answers now. The answers were in what? Inches. There's nothing in there about that. Conductor, the same, nothing about inches in that. You're bold scanning down quickly. All right, nothing there. Nothing in that about free conductor. Underground installations. Protection. Nothing there. Remember, you're only bold scanning the headers. Okay. No. Nothing there. Securing, isn't a securing question. Mechanical, nope. Mechanical, nope. Boom, free conductor. Length of free conductor. Now, immediately, you remember your answers. Your answers were 4, 6, 5, and 3. Well, I immediately see stuff in here. Now, here's where people can get screwed up. Sorry, I went too low. Here's where people can get screwed up. You immediately see this 6 inches and choose 6 inches, and you'll get it wrong. Why would you get it wrong? Think about the question. Let's look at the question. It says length of free conductor extending beyond the opening of a junction box. Now you might be saying, well, it didn't give me enough information, 6 inches, but that's from the point it enters or exits the cable or the raceway into the box. But there is a rule for how much has to be outside the opening of the junction box. Okay, and now it doesn't have to give you all these other details. Right now, you need to know that it didn't ask me the length of the free conductor. It asked me about the length of free conductor that extends beyond the opening. So you have to go look at the code and read between the lines here. And it says, okay, you have to have at least 6 inches of free conductor measured from the point of the box where the emerges from the raceway or cable sheath. Okay, all right. And then it says the 6 inches free conductor shall be permitted to be spliced or unspliced. That is a change for the 2023. You have to have that 6 inches, but guess what? If you happen to, the sheetrockers damages it with their little roto zip, cutting out their boxes, you know that never happens, right? But if they happen to damage it and you have to cut back and you don't have 6 inches, well, now you're allowed to splice it to get you that 6 inches. So if you had 4 inches because they damaged it, you cut the damage off and you put an extra pigtail on it to get you the 6 inches, now you can do that. Prior to the 2023, you couldn't do that even though probably 99% of the people would do that, it's not specifically permitted in the NEC, but now it is. So this makes sense. So this is a common sense change that makes sense. And so that's what that means. Now it says where the opening of the outlet, junction box, or switch point is less than 8 inches in any dimension. Okay. It says each conductor shall be long enough to extend at least 3 inches outside of the opening. So if you're dealing with any opening that is less than 8 inches in any dimension, okay, left to right, up to down, diagonally, if it's less than 8 inches in any dimension, then you probably have a hard time making these connections. So what it's going to say that, okay, well, if any dimension in this box is less than 8 inches, okay, so a small, let's say, nail-up box, if that's the case, then I need to make sure that not only do I have the 6 inches, but I need to make sure it also extends beyond the outside of the opening at least 3 inches. And that's going to give you enough to be able to make up the device and get it back in there. That's critical stuff that people overlook. They just think, I'll answer it, 6 inches. That's not what the question asks, type of thing. So let's see if they give you an image. Sometimes they give images. There you go. So here's an image. So right here, so measurement for 6 inches is from here. So that's the 6 inches. If this box right here is less than 8 inches in any direction, and it would be, okay, then you have to also make sure that it extends out at least 3 inches. Make sense? So this 6 inches might be enough to also extend out 3 inches beyond the box, okay, depending on how deep the box is, that type of thing. Now, you notice this box here, this is greater than 8 inches. See, this opening is like 10 inches. Well, if that's the case, then this conductor here only needs to be 6 inches. It doesn't have to extend outside the opening at least 3 inches. It only needs to be 6. So this 3 inches beyond the opening only applies to boxes that are less than 8 inches in any direction. Okay? Make sense? All right. So the answer here has to be 3. And there's our code reference in 300.14. Okay? All right, we'll do one more. If anybody's got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Thanks to all you that did get up early and join me. So we'll do one more, and I'll answer any questions you may have, and we'll move on. All right, and this should be an easy one. This should be quick. The thickness of a metal plate to protect cables through bored holes is 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch, or 3/64 of an inch. Well, this is one that I use example all the time on an exam. You should know this as an electrician. We teach it in our program. This is another example of a general wiring application. This is definitely in Chapter 3. It's most definitely going to be in Article 300, because that is the general rule, and you probably heard us talk about it. When you have a bored hole, you have to bore a hole, and you have to make sure that the bored hole, the edge of the bored hole to the edge of the framing member is at least 1.25 inches. If it is less than that, then you have to put a protective plate, right? So that protective plate has to be at least a certain thickness or listed otherwise. So in this exam question, it's just saying, what's the thickness of the metal plate? Doesn't say anything about a listed plate. It just says a metal plate. So there's a minimum thickness for this, okay? So remember, this is part of get used to looking at this question and going, wait a minute, this is a material question. This is a general requirement. This is asking about a piece of material, okay, that is in the electrical application. That's what's going to put it in 300. Get used to doing that. That'll get you where you need to be. Of course, you can go to the index and look under cables, and probably has under cables protection. Probably look under non-metallic sheath cable, and it probably has something underneath it under protection. All those things, when you're studying, take the time to do that to get more familiar with the index. For me, we know it's in 300. So we're going to go to 300 again. And we're looking for protection of cables. All right. So I'm going to go down, and there it is. Protection against damage. Okay. Where subject to physical damage, conductors, raceways, and cables shall be protected. Now, if you look back at the question, it said bored holes. So the question is very much about bored holes, but I will tell you this plate's going to be the same thickness regardless, but it's talking about the bored holes. So you know you're in the right place right here. Bored holes, cables and raceway through wood members. Okay. So here you'll notice really quickly, you'll see that it talks about thick. I see the word thick, so steel plate. 1/16 of an inch. Ironically enough, even if we went down to notching in wood, it's still 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so that doesn't change. You go down here and your non-metallic sheath cable and electrical non-metallic tubing through metal framing members. Same thing right here. Still 1/16 of an inch. You're probably already familiar with that normal nail plate application. They do make the ones now that actually go inside of the framing member as well. Probably a bit pricey. I don't know the price on those, but I guess I'm just old school. I like the normal nail plates, but it's 1/16 of an inch. Okay. So let's go back here to the question. And so obviously it's going to be 1/16 of an inch. Let's look where our references is. There you go. 300.4A1. Okay. All right, let's come back to me and I'll end it as today's lesson. Hopefully you got something out of these exam prep questions. The key takeaway from this is really read the question, focus on the question, use the question and the answers to help answer the question on your exam. Dissect it, take a little time and look at certain words that stand out that make that question unique. And then spend a little time as you're studying going into the index and seeing all the ways to possibly find the answer to that question using those unique words or unique phrases or unique references in the question. And when you're on an exam, get used to bold scanning, practice the technique. You only have to bold scan the sections, okay? And look for the triggers from the question in the sections. Now, is that going to work 100% of the time? No, they're going to be random, weird questions that just you struggle, you can't find. So if you're doing an exam and you get one of those questions, you need to mark it and move on, right? So it's key because you don't want to get bogged down on any specific question, especially when there's a ticker going and you have a time, that type of thing. But you want to make sure that you keep moving, because chances are you're going to stumble across the answer as you get further into your exam, and then you're going to have the answer and you'll be able to nail it, that type of thing. Okay? And be patient. And if you're not in a structured program like our Fast Tracks program, don't just use exam questions. Slow down and get the most out of your questions. You pay good money for it. Take your time. Don't try to time yourself like you would in an exam, like put 2 hours on the clock and try to answer them all. No, do each question individually. And if you want to time it, time each question individually. Like take your phone, put a timer on it, 2 minutes, and do it that way. And that way you get a good sense of how long it took you to answer a specific question. And that's going to help you get better. It's not good to put you under the stress while you're studying of answering all the questions in a 2-hour time period. Do each question individually, right? And don't worry about timing yourself until you get down to about 2 weeks from when you're going to take your exam. Until then, don't be in a hurry. Slowly dissect your questions. And in your structured program like ours, use those chevrons. Go in and out of your code book. Use the index as much as you can, table of contents as much as you can. Trust me, there's no shortcut to truly learning the National Electrical Code. All right, guys. Well, first broadcast from the new studio, official broadcast. And hopefully everything went good in the stream. Look for great things to come in the future. Now that we're in place and we have a separate rooms designed specifically for production, I'm excited. We're going to finally get it to where we wanted it to be. We thought we were going to get it in Texas a year and a half ago, but things fell through. But now it's a done deal. I am back in Virginia, and the studio is ready to go, and we've got the people that we need to help. And so we're looking forward to great content. Till next time, folks, stay safe. God bless. Appreciate you.